Hello and welcome to Learning with Lulu. So in today's video we are going to be doing a poetry analysis, and the poem that I've picked today, it's different, and being that October's right around the corner, we're kind of moving into fall. With October having Halloween, there's kind of a little bit of a spookiness to it. I thought this would be a really interesting and fitting poem moving into that season. So the poem that we're going to be analyzing today is by Robert Browning, and it is called Porphyria's Lover. Per usual with these poetry analysis, I want to read through it first because, as you can see, it's annotated quite a lot, so we're not going to jump just right into that. We're going to just read through the poem first, and then we'll go back through on a second reading to actually analyze it piece by piece. So, oh, and by the way, this is just found in the Norton Anthology English Literature for the Victorian Age. So, Porphyria's Lover. The rain set early in tonight. The sullen wind was soon awake. It tore the elm tops down for spite, and did its worst to vex the lake. I listened with heart fit to break, when glided in Porphyria. Straight she shut the cold out and the storm, and kneeled and made the cheerless grate blaze up, and all the cottage warm. Which done, she rose, and from her form withdrew the dripping cloak and shawl, and laid her soiled gloves by, and tied her hat, and let the damp hair fall. And last she sat down by my side, and called me. When no voice replied, she put my arm about her waist, and made her smooth white shoulder bare, and all her yellow hair displaced, and stooping made my cheek lie there, and spread o'er all her yellow hair, murmuring how she loved me. She, too weak for all her heart's endeavor to set its struggling passion free, from pride and vainer ties dissever, and give herself to me forever. But passion sometimes would prevail, nor could tonight's gay feast restrain a sudden thought of one so pale, for love of her, and all in vain. So she was come through wind and rain. Be sure I looked up at her eyes, happy and proud at last I knew Porphyria worshipped me. Surprise made my heart swell, and still it grew while I debated what to do. That moment she was mine, fair, perfectly pure and good. I found a thing to do, and all her hair in one long yellow string I wound 3 times her little throat around, and strangled her. No pain felt she, I am quite sure she felt no pain. As a shut bud that holds a bee, I warily oped her lids again, laughed the blue eyes without a stain, and I untightened next the tress about her neck, and cheek once more blushed bright beneath my burning kiss. I propped her head up as before, only this time my shoulder bore her head, which droops upon it still, the smiling rosy little head, so glad it has its utmost will, that all it scorned at once is fled, and I its love am gained instead. Porphyria's love, she guessed not how her darling one wish would be heard, and thus we sit together now, and all night long we have not stirred, and yet God has not said a word. So, this poem, especially when you think of poetry as just love sonnets and whatnot, this one definitely stands out as a bit shocking and disorienting. So, the dominant theme of this poem is possession it's just possession. And then with that is like control and power. Even the title itself, you'll notice, is Porphyria's Lover. So her lover belongs to her, and it's a lover of Porphyria. And that's a third person way of describing it. And so the poem starts out with a storm, with stormy weather, And often in, especially this age of literature, the weather without is reflective of your main character's internal state. And so we can know that there's a storm harboring inside of the narrator of this poem, based on the mention of a storm without. I want to point out that the poem itself, even though the title is in third person, the poem itself is in first person. So we get a little bit of a sense the speaker, because the title of the poem is Porphyria's Lover, we get a sense that the speaker doesn't even know who possesses who. Is this about a lover of Porphyria, or is it Porphyria's lover, they belong to her? So, the rain set early into night, the sullen wind was soon awake. It tore the elm tops down for spite. Right there, the top of a tree being torn down, we can kind of look at as a bit of a castration anxiety that is existing within the narrator. And it did its worst to vex the lake. I listened with heart fit to break when glided in Porphyria straight. And I want to point out that it says she glided in. It's this effortlessness in her being. There's beauty in her control of her physical body. She's very confident. And from that is probably where we get this anxiety in this narrator, this castration anxiety, because in an unhealthy masculine, a confident feminine is emasculating. So that's where this castration anxiety is coming from, because she glides in, she is confident. And nailed and made the cheerless grate blaze up, and all the cottage warm. Just want to point out the blazing up. This feminine is bringing up this excitement, this warming in her counterpart. And with that whole intro, we get the sense this narrator, he's sad, and she comes in and lights everything up. She's warming everything up, and while she's doing this, though, there's also this binary that she is drenched from the storm without. She brings the storm in, and also I want you to just notice, like, everything with her is in motion. From the moment she walks in, all of it, she is in motion. And we still have this anxiety in the narrator. So withdrew the dripping cloak. Again, she's brought the storm in. And laid her soiled gloves by untied, her hat, and let the damp hair fall. So again, dripping, soiled, damp. She's drenched from the outer storm. And this is maybe a little bit of also a foreshadowing of what's to come because of the storm within our narrator. Let's see. At last she sat down by my side and called me when no voice replied. So she says, like, okay, she doesn't actually say this, but essentially she's like, hey babe, and the narrator doesn't reply. And so if you can just picture that in, like, kind of more a modern relationship, picture, you know, this kind of brooding dude, and this beautiful, charismatic girl walks in and is like, hey babe, and he just sits there quiet. There's a battle of wills going on here. and he's just kind of being weird. So then it says, she put my arm about her waist. So again, you see this her kind of being like, hey, like, I want to be close to you. And I missed one little thing I want to add. With her calling him and her confidence in his brooding, and that being a battle of wills, also notice that, like, sometimes when you call for someone to do something, you're calling for them to do something for you. So he may almost get the sense that he's like a servant to her because she is so confident in her feminine. So like a servant, someone who can do something for her. Okay, so anyway, back to the rest of it. And made her smooth white shoulder bare. Da, da, da. And stooping made my cheek lie there. So she's like pulling him in close to her. And spread o'er all her yellow hair. And then murmuring how she loved me. So murmuring, we could take that two ways. Is she murmuring because it's like a romantic scene? You know, think of any romantic movie, and sometimes people in hushed voices are like, oh, I love you, but she's murmuring it. Do we take that as it being romantic, or is she not confident in saying it? Is she too weak to say that she loves me? Too weak for all her heart's endeavor to set its struggle passion free from pride and vainer ties to sever, which with that vainer ties, something is tying her to someone else for vain reasons, which we could maybe interpret to mean that there is another guy she is stepping out on who she is with for money. So that might be a stretch to you, but that's what English teachers are supposed to do, right? So yeah, she's tied to someone else for vain reasons, but she's left them to now be with this lover of hers. And we also get the sense that the narrator thinks that she's uppity and won't be with him because he's not good enough. Okay. But passion sometimes would prevail, nor could tonight's gay feast restrain a sudden thought of one so pale for love of her. So this is what he imagines she feels, and so he's saying she was at some fun feast, but she couldn't resist coming and visiting him. So she come through wind and rain, be sure I looked up at her eyes. Happy and proud, at last I knew Porphyria worshipped me. So he thinks that he's possessing her thoughts for her to come to him in this situation, and he has turned her into an object in which to put his ideas, and then he judges her for those ideas. So again, he has turned her into an object, and he's then able to put his ideas into her, and then he judges her for those. And then it says, that moment she was mine. Mine. He says that 2 times. Fair, perfectly pure, and good. So he thinks that she thinks that he loves her. So he's not really saying he loves her, but he thinks that she thinks, it's that whole, friends thing, that he loves her. I also have so he's defining it when he's saying mine, mine, and then perfectly pure and good, he is defining her for himself. And then we get the strangling. And he says, and strangled her. No pain felt she. Again, she is now an object, a doll. He then gets comfortable with having her there. It's also interesting how his strangling of her, it's just like that. It's not super detailed. He just cares about the turn of power towards himself. She came in being the powerful element. He was not despondent, but just like being pouty about it. And now that he has the power because he strangled her, now he has the power, and now he's comfortable. So I am quite sure she felt no pain. As a shut bud that holds a bee, I rarely opened her lids again. So her eyes were closed, and usually you always see when people have passed away, the ones who love them, who respect them, will close their eyes. He opens her eyes because, again, she's become an object. She's now a doll that he can be comfortable with because she's not threatening to his control and power. And that's where we end it. Is just him being comfortable with his gain of power. Everything that you'll kind of read from here is just the continuation of her being an object, a doll that does not threaten him now, and that he is now content. And it says, and all night long we have not stirred, and yet God has not said a word. And I have written here, he did something bad, but how bad? Oh, I see. Yeah, so he says, he's basically saying, it couldn't have been that bad if God hasn't struck me down yet. Because he says, and God has not said a word. So he's saying, well, how bad could have it been if we're still here? Sorry. And then just a last few final notes. I just want to point out earlier when she has come in, like I said, it's creating a very intimate scene. She stokes the fire and thinks he's asleep, but he's not. She's snuggling in physically by like manipulating him. Again, he feels threatened. And then it turns to him taking the power, because he says there's this power verb here where it's worshipped. And so Porphyria worshipped me. So we come from this intimate scene. He's kind of being threatened, but he also turns her into an object by implanting his ideas into her, what he thinks she is thinking, and then he's not going to be comfortable until he has the full control, full power, and the only way for him to do that is to permanently make her the object. So that is today's poetry analysis of the poem Porphyria's Lover by Robert Browning. If you found this video interesting, make sure to like this video and definitely subscribe to the channel. Share with anyone else who may benefit from it, needing help in analyzing poetry. Maybe you're studying this poem for a class. That's how I was first introduced to it. Definitely didn't go seeking this one out on my own. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hope to see you back around. Bye. As a final note, I'd also love for you to comment down below, what are your thoughts on this poem? Did it make you uncomfortable? Did you anticipate that? Is there anything in it that you feel could be further analyzed that I didn't touch on? Do you disagree with any of my analysis of it? Let me know. I would love to have a further discussion about this poem, Porphyria's Lover, down in the comments. So be sure to do that. Again, bye.